Okie dokie, I believe we are all the way being recorded. Hello and welcome to my graveyard. I am your host of the evening, the Cemetery Man from Salem, Mass. Always taking names, kicking candy ass, live in the color here with you on Grande's Graveyard. And today I've got a little bit of a bonus video here. I wasn't planning on doing this, but I saw my good buddy from Brian's Horror Corner over at his channel, Brian's Horror Corner. If you have not heard of his channel, I will drop a link down below. You can go subscribe to Brian. He puts out excellent horror movie reviews. Every month he has like a theme of something he's going to do. And today he dropped a video that intrigued me, and it was to pick your favorite horror movie from each year that you were alive, plus an honorable mention from said year. So he was born like the 70s, so he went from the 70s all the way up to 2022. I was born, of course, in 1996, so I'm going to go from 96 to 2021. The reason I'm going to disinclude 2022 is I haven't, obviously, number one, the year isn't over yet, so there could be 6 months plus of stuff that comes out and changes my mind on the horror genre, of stuff that I consider my favorite, least favorite, what have you. And I figured I'd just go from the years that I've lived total, in this amount of time. So we're going to be going from 96 to 2021. Like I said, an honorable mention and a favorite from each year, horror movie wise. I've got the list up to the side here, so if you notice me looking this way, I'm just reading the list off the screen because it's easier that way. I didn't want to have my phone up, holding my phone every kind of minute. I thought that was kind of stupid. I won't go crazy in depth on all of these. I want it to be a fairly short video, even for me. I mean, I usually tend to go long, but we'll get right into this. First up, the year 1996, the year I was born, and the honorable mention is going to go to Dario Argento's The Stendhal Syndrome. I love this film. It is one that has truly grown on me. Initially, when I started to make this list, I was going to go with From Dusk Till Dawn as the honorable mention. It's probably the more entertaining movie of the two and the one that more people have seen, but I don't know. Stendhal Syndrome has really grown on me over time. I think it's a really interesting sort of, not just a rape revenge film, but a truly great psychological horror movie. And I don't know, I'm really a big fan of the Stendhal Syndrome. That's one that I wanted to give a little bit of love to as the honorable mention. And then my favorite from 1996, it's funny because I came out the same week as it. It is Scream from 1996. Of course, the movie, in my opinion, and I know a lot of people now will argue with this, it's the movie that, in my opinion, saved horror. I think it got people talking about horror again. Word of mouth spread this movie, and it got people going to the cinema again. It made horror popular again, and I think that's what I mean when I say it saved horror. Now, I know a lot of people will say, "Oh, Scream is overrated. Its reputation, and it annoys people." And people say now that it's very played out, and it is. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think you can understate the importance of that movie and what it did for the genre when it came out. I really do believe Scream is one of the most important horror movies of all time. And definitely, if say in my lifetime, it's one of the most important ones ever made. So Scream easily taking the number one spot of 1996. Coming up next, though, 1997. Now, this was really tough. There was quite a few good horror movies. It's funny, this got, at first, there were so many to pick from each year, and then towards the last 3 years, I had a hard time picking two. Like just picking two, let alone, it was hard earlier because there's so much quality, and towards the end, it was like, damn, I don't even know if I have two. So, I mean, it is what it is. But my honorable mention from 1997 is going to be a little bit movie from Satoshi Kon. This is Perfect Blue. This is a psychological anime horror film that I saw recently, maybe a couple years ago, and it just absolutely blew me away. It really spoke to me and where I was in my life at that point, and it was just a really one of those movies where I looked in the mirror after. I was like, damn, and it just gave you so much to think about. And it's one of those horror movies that, I don't know if there's one specific way you want to interpret it. I think there's many different ways you can interpret it. And that's going to drive some people nuts, but visually, I think it's a stunning film. There's a lot of great sequences of our lead on the train looking at her reflection, and her reflection, kind of looks back at her evil, and great scenes of our lead screaming under the bathtub water. And she's basically a pop singer that wants to become a TV actress. And it's all of the horrors she goes through in her life when she tries to transition from one thing that she's known and good at, trying to transition into something that she's less known and less good at, and the horrors that come with that. And people start dying. Gore ensues. Very striking visuals. I love Perfect Blue. In my opinion, the greatest anime horror film ever made, in my opinion. But number one of 1997, it is Funny Games, yes, directed by Michael Haneke. The movie, and I've said this before, I know Nightwatch Zone did a top 20 scariest movie moments. He actually featured a clip that I recorded for him on there where I discussed Funny Games being the movie that scared me the most. A horror movie that I think could happen, a horror movie that really subverted the tropes of the genre and really just truly frightened me. The fourth wall breaking, the lead heel kind of winking at the camera, and I don't know, just some of the shit that happens in this movie. It's not what you see, it's what's suggested in this film. It's truly like the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre in its violence is very much more suggested, but you get the picture. And it's one of those horror movies that you're really able to fill in the blanks with your own mind. It really makes you think. It really makes you think about the cliches of horror films. And why do we watch horror films? And making me think about those things truly did scare me to my core. And I'm not sure if that was even the intention. I think the intention was to sort of poke fun at horror movies. But at the end of the day, he ended up making a very effective horror film on its own 2 feet. Funny Games from 1997, my favorite of that year. Coming from 1998, we're going to go with The Faculty. This is my favorite. This is honorable mention. Honorable mention first, and then, of course, favorite second. Honorable mention is going to be The Faculty. Now, this is, in my opinion, the best movie neo-slasher wise, even though I know this is considered not really a neo-slasher. It's a neo-horror film, not a neo-slasher film. But this is like my favorite movie that takes the Scream formula and did something different with it, because you had a ton of ripoffs. You had your urban legends, your I Know What You Did Last Summers. But I think The Faculty was one that really did something new and creative and exciting with the horror genre. And I like the cast. I really like Jordana Brewster. And, I think this movie definitely has a great cast. I really like The Faculty's cast. Robert Rodriguez does a great job as the director. But my favorite pick for 1998, I'm just going to have to go through the original Ringu. Of course, directed by Hideo Nakata. I think this movie is one of the movies that made horror scary again. Because for a while, after Scream came out, a lot of things it was fun to parody the genre. It was fun to make fun of the genre and laugh at it. But I think in a lot of ways, Ringu is a movie that made horror scary again. This and my number one pick for 1999 are two movies that really made the genre truly frightening again. We're not laughing as we go along with this movie. We're truly terrified by Sadako Yamamura coming through the screen and into your living room and killing you with the stare of death and the cursed videotape. And I don't know, it's one of those movies that I just love the idea. And I think it's a very well executed horror film. One that, every now and again I like to pop in and it really still holds its true effect to me. That is the 1998 favorite, Ringu. Coming from 1999, honorable mention is going to be Audition, of course, from Takashi Miike. I absolutely love Audition. I think it's a movie that's discussing more of the horrors of love. I know a lot of people discuss the ending and how brutal it gets, and it's classic Miike. Let's be honest. I mean, you know what you're getting into. Well, you may not know what you're getting into, but you know the type of style Takashi Miike uses and where he's willing to go with his films. And Audition is one that is probably his most famous effort over the years. And I don't know, I think for good reason. I really enjoy Takashi Miike's Audition. Great film. Number one, though, of 1999, I know this is going to be controversial. A lot of people love or hate this one. This is the Blair Witch Project. I think one of the most effective shot on video horror films, and another horror film, like I was saying, like Ringu before, it made horror scary again. It was really a movie that I know certain people went into seeing it thinking it was real. I wasn't one of those people. I saw it years later, knew it was fake, but it still had the impact on me between repeat viewings. It's one of those movies where I saw what they saw, even though you don't see much. I felt what they felt, and I really went through that journey with them. It's almost like you're the fourth person because it is shot on video. You're the fourth person in that group. And I always remember the ending of the kids running into the house and just one standing in the corner, the camera drops, you hear the scream, and just thinking from the first time I saw it, that was so damn creepy. And that's why I love horror. To me, it's memorable moments like the ending of the Blair Witch Project that truly stay with you and last with you over time. So that's going to be my favorite for 1999. Coming in the new millennium now, my honorable mention for the year 2000. This was very tough. The year 2000 was very hard to pick. And these two could have gone either way. But the honorable mention, I went American Psycho. I think Christian Bale gives one of the great performances in the history of the horror genre. Just the suave businessman who may or may not be a serial killer. While we're watching the whole film, we think he is. And at the end, was this all in his head? Was it all not in his head? And Hey, do you like Huey Lewis in the News? And the chainsaw drop. I mean, so many great moments in this movie. I think it is a classic movie when you're looking for great acting in horror. Christian Bale's performance in this is, I always say this to piss people off because a lot of people don't like Christian Bale as Batman. I say Christian Bale's performance in this is just as good as Heath Ledger's performance in The Dark Knight. I think it's that good of a performance. And it's one that he absolutely not only should have been nominated for Best Actor at the Academy Awards, he should have won it. I think acting performance wise in the history of horror, this has got to be a top 5 performance. It's that good. American Psycho, I love it. Mary Harron, the director, she does a great job. Highly recommend that one. That's my honorable mention. But my number one for the year 2000 is actually going to be Final Destination. I've actually done an episode covering all of these movies, and I don't know, there's something about the first Final Destination that just gives you that great sense of uneasiness and the whole fear of, death has a design and death has a plan. And I love the cast again, Devon Sawa, Ali Larder. I really enjoy the cast of this movie. Tony Todd as the sort of personification of death. I really like Final Destination. I think it's a great horror film, and the death sequences are fantastic. The whole psychology of it. It's one of those movies that every time I watch it, it inspires me. I'm like, damn, like I wish the genre could be this inspiring again. But I don't know. It's been a long time, and I don't know if too many movies can take from what Final Destination did in inspiring you. It's one of those films that just every time I watch it, I'm inspired to watch more horror and think about horror more. But from the year 2001, now we're going to go honorable mention Jeepers Creepers. Now it's funny, this year there was quite a few good horror movies, but I had to go Jeepers Creepers just based on rewatchability factor. This is a horror movie I watch around Halloween, October season, whatever you want to call it, pretty much every year. I watch this one a lot, and I know that in real life the director is a piece of shit, and I don't want to go into that fully, but I do think this is an effective horror movie, and I think the acting again is a big standout. Justin Long in particular, I think he almost steals the movie. I think he's really, really good as the lead. Of course, he and his sister Trish, they encounter this trucker, which was all ripped off from an Unsolved Mysteries episode. If you haven't seen that, type in on YouTube Unsolved Mysteries Jeepers Creepers. The entire opening 25 minutes of this movie is ripped off from that episode of Unsolved Mysteries. It's crazy that they didn't get sued over it, but it is still an effective opening, whether it's Unsolved Mysteries or Jeepers Creepers. See, sometimes it's okay to borrow as long as you're effective in doing so, and they were effective in doing so. Now, this is a movie that maybe would have had the number one spot of that year if it wasn't for the ending. I can't stand the ending of Jeepers Creepers. It has House of a Thousand Corpses syndrome, where I like the first 85 to 90% of it, and the last 10%, I'm just like, God damn it, what the hell are you thinking? That lady, the psychic lady, what the fuck? I don't know. I hate the ending of Jeepers Creepers, but it's a good movie in and of itself. But the number one spot has to go to a movie that nobody ever really mentions, and it was directed by Bill Paxton, and the late Bill Paxton, may he rest in peace, and it's Frailty from 2001. I don't even want to spoil this one. This is a horror movie that everybody needs to see. It's one that sort of gets lost in the shuffle nowadays. It's 20 plus years old now, which is crazy to think, but it's the only movie I believe he ever directed, and man, he hit a home run. I absolutely love Frailty. Just go see Frailty. I don't want to give anything away. 2002, though, we're going to go overseas to Japan, and our honorable mention is going to be Ju-on the Grudge. Of course, I'm a diehard fan of Ju-on the Grudge. I've actually discussed the first 4 Ju-on movies, of course, Ju-on the Curse 1 and 2, and then Ju-on the Grudge 1 and 2 on a past episode. Huge fan of Kayako Saeki and Toshio Saeki. I'm a huge fan of the antagonist, the non-linear storylines. I really like Ju-on the Grudge. To me, it's another horror movie that really hits home in the scare department. I think it's a scary horror film. But my number one spot for 2002 had to go to Lucky McKee's May. I really love this movie. And again, talking about great acting performances, you cannot understate the performance of Angela Bettis as the title character May in this movie. The girl who was cross-eyed her whole life, and then one day she finally gets it fixed. She starts dating, and she realizes the horrors of dating and the horrors of friendships and the horrors of things that she was never exposed to at a young age and able to digest, thus realizing that there is no such thing as a perfect person. There's only perfect parts. And on Halloween night, May decides to create her own perfect person using perfect parts. To me, one of the most underrated horror movies of the last 20 years. I love it. It's another one. It is similar to Final Destination. It's an inspiring movie. The very ending of it, it's just, I remember the first time I saw it, I stood up. Like, it's one of those, like, I stood up and I was like, that's why I love horror. The ending of May, the very ending, the very last shot, I don't want to ruin it, but there may be a hair swipe, if you will. To me, it's why I love the genre. I absolutely love May, a great horror movie, and one that I think people need to talk about more. 2003, we're going to go honorable mention, Final Destination 2, the pile-up scene. I just did a retro review I edited from the Final Destination series review that I did. I talked all those movies. I specifically wanted to, narrow that one down, do like a 15-minute review for it. So that's up on the channel recently if you haven't seen that. But coming at number one for 2003, this is an easy one for me. Arguably my favorite movie of all of these. It's close. Like maybe at the end of this, if there's time, I'll go through like my top three of all of these movies. But this one would probably be in the top three, and it's Switchblade Romance, aka High Tension, from the year 2003, Alexandre Aja's film. It's exactly what it says it is. It's 90 minutes of high tension. It's everything that I used to love about the genre, that I felt was missing from it for such a long time. And when I saw this movie, I felt it had everything to it. It had great suspense. It had great gore. It had good acting. It had great tense moments. You're on your edge of your seat pretty much from the word go. And I don't know. I think High Tension is, everything I want in a horror film. It's the total package. It's a 5-tool horror film, if that's such a thing. But I love the film. I really do love High Tension. That's going to come in at number one for 2003. 2004, this year was a little bit easier for me. There was only really two that stood out like mightily. First is Three Extremes. I really enjoy that movie. It's a horror anthology from Japan, Korea, and I forget the third country. I forget, but I know there's three. I think Hong Kong is Hong Kong is the third country, I think, or maybe Indonesian. I forget, but it's three short horror stories. I've actually done an episode discussing this. It's one of my favorite horror anthologies of all time. There's a body horror segment, there's more of a slasher segment, and there's more of a psychological dreamsicle segment. To me, it's a great anthology because each story is so different from the last, and each one of them goes extreme. Hence the title, Three Extremes. I love that movie. I highly recommend. It's like one of the most underrated horror anthologies out there to me. But number one, easy one, a movie that gave birth to probably the most famous franchise post 2000s. It's this or Paranormal Activity, and it's the original Saw, James Wan's film. I love Saw. I think it's a great movie. Of course, the twist at the end, and the whole idea of the games, and the whole idea of, do people value their life? Do people cherish their life? I love the idea of Saw. I think it's a great film. 2005, we're going to go, it's funny, we're going to go right back to the sequel, Saw 2. I love Saw 2. I think it's a great sequel. 2005 was a bad year. I went through the whole year of 2005. It's a pretty shitty year because like, I didn't think Saw 2 would make this honorable mention. It did. That's how bad 2005 was as a whole. Saw 2, I like the sequel. I think it's fun. It's one of those classic sequels that just ups everything. Let's up the gore, up the psychology, up the body count, up the traps, and they do that. I think Shawnee Smith does a great job. Tobin Bell gives his best performance as John Kramer Jigsaw. Donnie Wahlberg is even good in the film. I don't know. I really like this one. It's the best Saw sequel by a mile. But the top spot for 2005 is going to go to Rob Zombie's film. And I know a lot of people hate Rob Zombie, but I think this movie is arguably his best. It is The Devil's Rejects. When it comes to great exploitation horror films in the last 20 years, I really do not look much further than this movie right here. I love this movie. I think Sid Haig is great as Captain Spaulding. I think Bill Moseley as Otis Driftwood was fantastic. And I remember at the time there was a petition to get him nominated for an Oscar. I mean, that, I don't know, a lot of people will laugh at that now, but that's how good Bill Moseley and intimidating Bill Moseley is in this movie. And the Tutti Fucking Frutti and the soundtrack, arguably the best soundtrack of any of these movies, is in this. I mean, the Terry Reid song, To Be Treated Right, and, the Allman Brothers song. And I don't know, I really love The Devil's Rejects. To me, a perfect exploitation horror film and the best of the year 2005. 2006, we're going to go an underrated little zombie film for the honorable mention. It is Fido. To me, it's the movie that George Romero was trying to make the last 10 years of his career and just couldn't do it. I don't think he moved on with what zombie movies were doing. I don't think he could reinvent it again. But this is a movie I watched it and I remember immediately being like, I wish George Romero had directed that. Like, God damn it. Like, because I love George and I wanted George to get credit, but Fido is a damn good movie. If you haven't seen it, it's an interesting take on the zombie genre. Another one I don't really want to spoil for people. I think Fido is a damn good horror movie though. Go see it. But the number one spot for 2006, it is going to be Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. To me, another interesting take at the slasher movie genre and the performance by the lead who plays Leslie Vernon. Nathan Basil, I believe his name is. He absolutely nails it as Leslie Vernon. I love this movie and the psychology of a slasher villain in a slasher movie. It's a different kind of take on it. I know a lot of people bash it because there's no gore, but in my opinion, it's a great slasher movie and a movie that reinvented slashers for years to come, even though very few movies tried to rip this off or follow in its footsteps, hence it being underrated. It's one that I mentioned in depth on the underrated horror episode, underrated versus overrated horror. I love Behind the Mask, one of my favorites, and my favorite from the year 2006. 2007, this was hard. There was so many good horror movies from the year 2007, and I couldn't believe there was some, like I left Death Proof off this, and I love Death Proof. But I had to go with P2 as the honorable mention. It's a movie that I don't know why I've always been a mark for it. I think it's great. It's high tension in a parking garage. That's basically what it is. It's like a remake of High Tension produced by Alex Aja in a parking garage. Maybe I'm a sucker for high tension plot. You know, a guy chasing a woman for 90 minutes in a fucking parking garage, and the Elvis Presley music and Wes Bentley's performance. Rachel Nichols does a great job. The kind of cold atmosphere of this film taking place on Christmas Eve. And I don't know, I really always enjoyed this movie. I think Frank Calhoun does a great job as the director. P2, very underrated horror movie. Where is the special edition Blu-ray? It has been 15 fucking years. This movie deserves a special edition Blu-ray. I don't care who I have to bitch to it about. It needs to happen. Let's just say that. But my number one for the year 2007 is Inside. Yes, one of my favorite horror movies of the last 15 years easily. I love Inside. I just adore this movie. Of course, the story of a woman who's pregnant. She's due to give birth the next day. An intruder breaks into her house and all hell breaks loose. I mean, crazy gory, crazy violent. The suspense and atmosphere, I said this in the episode that I discovered or I discussed the French Five, the tension throughout this movie and the building of tension. It's the only movie to me that came close to the original John Carpenter Halloween, when it's kind of buttering you up at the beginning and you see our assailant on the outside looking in, lighting a cigarette. Very creepy stuff to me. I don't know. I think Inside's a fucking masterpiece. Love this movie. 2008 honorable mention is going to be Let the Right One In, a great vampire movie. It's also sort of, well, I don't want to say a children's film, but of course a child is the lead of it. So it's an interesting take. There's some bad CGI in this one. I won't lie. Like, this is definitely one where I rewatch it and sometimes I just kind of roll my eyes at how bad some of the CG is in this film. But everything else around it is fantastic. It's masterfully paced and done. Slow burn to the finish. And I don't know, there's something about Let the Right One In that always kind of keeps me interested in the franchise and interested in the vampire genre, I should say. I really enjoy Let the Right One In. 2008's top movie, though, easy pick for me, it's Martyrs. I think it's one of the most disturbing movies ever made. It also has a lot to say about psychology and the idea of, is there a way, if you're beaten close enough to death, that you can experience a little bit of the afterlife but still return? And we may or may not get our answer with this film. I think it's great. It's brutal, but I think it's the psychological horror of this movie that really keeps me afraid of it. And it's one of those movies that, of all of these, it's probably the one I've seen the least because it's the hardest to rewatch. It's that effective with its scares. But if you scared me to that point and you got me to the point where I'm hesitant to rewatch it because of how dark and twisted your film is, you did something right. Martyrs, easily number one of 2008. 2009, honorable mention, very underrated movie here, Afterlife, with Christina Ricci, Liam Neeson, Justin Long. This is a fucking really good horror movie that nobody talks about. Basically, Christina Ricci, she gets into a car accident very early on in the film, and she wakes up in this morgue where Liam Neeson is the main head of this morgue, and he's basically telling her, listen, you died. And she's like, if I've died, how am I standing here talking to you? And the whole movie is basically a back and forth. Is she dead? Is she alive? Justin Long is trying to uncover the mystery. Is she dead? Is she alive? It's a fucking great movie. I really enjoy Afterlife. It's one you could probably watch for free on anything. I really enjoy it. Liam Neeson steals this movie. Christina Ricci's naked, and you see her yits throughout the entire movie. Granted, she's supposed to be dead, kind of like she's kind of like no color to her, so it's like I don't know, but still a beautiful looking woman naked the whole movie. I mean, I ain't gonna complain. I enjoy Afterlife. I think it's a damn good movie. Highly recommend it. Highly underrated. But my number one for 2009. It's going to be another vampire film. This is Thirst. I really enjoy this movie. I was just totally blown away by this when I finally sat down and watched this really interesting movie about this man who gets this blood donation as he's trying to cure an incurable disease, and the blood transfer he gets is from a vampire, thus becoming a vampire. And it's a fun flick. It's crazy. It's off the walls, but man, it's a fun flick. I really like Thirst. Highly recommend that one too. 2010 honorable mention is going to be Adam Green's Frozen. Yeah, I know. I didn't think I'd be mentioning Adam Green either, but 2010 was another really solid year for horror, and this wasn't an easy pick by any means, but Frozen's one I always go back and rewatch, mainly because of the characters. I really like Shawn Ashmore in the film. I really like Kevin Ziggers, Emma Bell. I think the three of them do a great job. I like the whole idea of a horror movie where you're trapped on a ski lift and the conditions, battling the conditions, and not only that, but wolves, rabid wolves below. And should we jump, should we not jump, should we wait, should we not wait? The whole idea of this movie I thought was a really good idea and setting for a horror film, something different. And I think Adam Green did a good job, and that's coming from someone who's not a fan of Adam Green, so I promise you it's an unbiased statement there. But my number one pick, easy for 2010, we're going to be talking about this one on the show this week. This is James Wan's Insidious. One of the scariest horror movies I've ever seen in my life, and I'm super excited to get into it on the show this week. So we'll leave that one there. 2011, honorable mention is going to be Cabin in the Woods. And for a long time, this would have been my favorite of 2011. But recently, I've gone back and rewatched the number one film on this, and I don't know. I think it's really overtaken Cabin in the Woods. I love Cabin in the Woods, but The Woman will come in at the number one spot, Lucky McKee's film. I love The Woman. I think it's such a fucking great horror movie. Has a little bit of everything in it. And I don't know, it's just another movie. I believe it's streaming in 4K on Prime. You could watch this. Highly recommend. It's a great movie. Sean Bridgers is the lead heel, gives a great performance. Pollyanna McIntosh is the woman. Lauren Ashley Carter. Of course, Angela Bettis returns to work with Lucky McKee. I love this movie, from the cast to the idea to its brutality. It's disturbing. Don't get me wrong. The Woman is a disturbing film, but in the best of way. I really enjoy The Woman from 2011. Easily my top pick. 2012, we're going to go honorable mention, underrated one, body horror movie here from the Soska sisters. This is American Mary. And, of course, starring Catherine Isabel, who I love from movies like Ginger Snaps, which was close to making this list, I got to be honest. I forget if it was 2000, 2001, 2002, somewhere around there. It was hard to keep that off this list because I love Ginger Snaps. But American Mary is a really cool one about body horror and, kind of, I don't know. It's one of those, if I fucking saying too much, I could ruin the movie. I don't want to ruin the movies here. So American Mary is a great movie, though. Lords of Salem, Rob Zombie's film, is coming, in at the number one spot, 2012. I love The Lords of Salem. It's my favorite Rob Zombie film. To me, it's a middle finger to every one of his critics and people that say, he can only do movies with the crazy over-the-top dialogue and the crazy over-the-top characters and gore and violence and exploitation, brutality. And this is a movie that's a very much more laid back psychological witch film where he tries to use a lot of colors and he tried to reach his inner Stanley Kubrick. And a lot of people will say, he failed miserably, but I don't know. I appreciate Rob Zombie trying something different and going for it and kind of flipping off all the naysayers that always kind of doubt him. I don't know. I'm sort of a fan of Rob Zombie. I appreciate that he is completely real and doesn't give a fuck what anybody thinks. I think a lot of people that rubs them the wrong way. Like, oh, you don't give a fuck what I think? But that's why I love Rob Zombie. I would say Lords of Salem is my favorite film from him. I really like it. 2013, honorable mention is going to be VHS 2. I enjoy the segments, all of them except one in this movie. I really love the one with the Indonesian death cult. I always thought that was fucking crazy. It's Time and the box cutter and Papa and holy shit. I mean, one of the most batshit crazy horror segments of all time. I love VHS 2. That segment, mainly the death cult segment. I think it's called Safe Haven. Amazing, from the director of The Raid. And I don't know. I think it's a great stuff. Some great stuff. VHS 2. Number one, though, from 2013 is going to be James Wan's The Conjuring. To me, one of the best haunted house movies of the last 10 years, the best of the last 10 years. Old school 70s slow burn haunted house horror in the vein of Burnt Offerings, in the vein of the Amityville Horror. I love The Conjuring. Patrick Wilson, Vera Farmiga do a great job as the leads. James Wan's best film, in my opinion. From a direction standpoint, easily his best movie. 2014, honorable mention is going to be Goodnight Mommy. Now, I saw this in New York City, actually, I believe the week it premiered. And man, it was a fun movie to see in a theater because everybody else was sort of shocked by it. Basically tells the story of this mother of these twin kids, and she comes home, she has these bandages on her face, and the kids are like, what the hell? And she's being mean to them, unnecessarily so. And they believe that this woman who has returned is not their mother. And a lot of psychology, a lot of dark ideas. And towards the end, this almost becomes like a Saw film. Like, it becomes very much like Saw in its last like 20 minutes. It gets very fucking brutal out of nowhere. And I don't know, I appreciate the tonal shift. I think it starts off very creepy, atmospheric, and weird, and it sort of ends very brutal and crazy. And I don't know, I really liked Goodnight Mommy. It's one of those movies, you could probably see the twist coming 10 minutes into the film, but it's one of those movies you can just enjoy the ride and experience because it's not about the twist as much as it is the experience and the ride getting to the end. That's why I really like Goodnight Mommy. I think it's a damn good horror film. Next up, though, it's going to be the top pick for 2014. Arguably my favorite horror movie of all of these is It Follows. I love It Follows. To me, it's the best horror movie that year, the best horror movie of the last 10 years. I've championed it from the day I saw it. I think it's everything the genre needs to be. The great score from Disaster Piece, the lead, Micah Monroe, is great. The idea of a sexually transmitted monster movie, I don't know. To me, it's everything I love to love in a good horror movie, and one that was original. It kind of harkened back to the old school John Carpenter style. And the cinematography reminds me a lot of something that Dean Cundy would have been the cinematographer for. I love It Follows. I think it's a masterpiece. 2015, honorable mention is going to be Insidious Chapter 3. Funny enough, another one we're going to be talking about the show this week, so we'll just skip over that one. 2015's topic, though, goes to Robert Eggers' The Witch. I love this movie. Very unsettling, very unnerving, but very effective, and a horror movie that I think we sort of needed at the time. I think we needed an indie horror movie that made a lot of noise, and thankfully this one did. Robert Eggers has gone on to do bigger and better things because of this movie, and I think it's a damn effective horror movie. I really like it. 2016 now, honorable mention. This one, of all of them, people probably argue, is this really a horror movie? And it's The Neon Demon from Nicholas Winding Refn. I know a lot of people wouldn't probably consider this horror. I would. I think it's the horrors of the modeling universe and the modeling world. That's how I sort of saw it. And there's also necrophilia in this movie. There is corpse eating in this movie. I don't really understand, but I know there are a lot of people who will say, oh, it's not really a horror movie, Grande. It's a psychological whatever. But I think The Neon Demon is a horror movie. To me, it is. And it takes great inspiration from Suspiria and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And to me, it's taking inspiration from those movies without completely ripping them off. And that's why I really enjoy this movie. The visuals from Nicholas Winding Refn are stunning. The writing is a little iffy at times, but I do enjoy this movie. To me, it's one of those movies that I really appreciate. Something that it feels like it would have came out in the 70s, like the mid-70s, just a really trippy psychedelic film. And I enjoy The Neon Demon. To me, a great, great horror movie. That's the honorable mention. But my topic for 2016 is going to be the French film Raw. And it's basically discussing the horrors of fitting in. This girl wants to fit in at her new school. And basically, she joins this kind of, frat, if you will, and she has to eat this raw rabbit guts, and basically she becomes a cannibal over time. And it's a creepy ass movie. I really enjoy Raw. I think it's a damn good one. Last couple years we're gonna get here. Let's see, 2017 we got honorable mention The Babysitter. I thought it was a fun movie. It was like a straight to Netflix horror movie. Fun. It was directed by Mick G, so it's nothing great, nothing to run home about. But to me, it was a fun enough horror movie. It knew what it was trying to be. And it's one of those, if you eat popcorn, just kind of turn your brain off while watching. It's fun enough. Bella Thorne is looking good in it as always. I think they made her take a shower before the thing started. And I don't know, I really liked Samara Weaving. I don't know. I like The Babysitter. I think it's a fun little horror movie. Nothing great, but an honorable mention for 2017. This was, I think, the worst year of all of these was 2017 because I had the hardest time picking two from this year. Tragedy Girls, though, was the number one spot. This is a really, really interesting take on a slasher film. Another one that I don't know if how many people have seen this. I will say Tragedy Girls, go see it. It's probably my favorite from 2017. Granted, that's the worst year of all of these, 2017, easily. 2018, though, we're going to go honorable mention The House That Jack Built. Really fucking weird movie. It starts off basically just murder after murder and not much plot. And then it ends like very religious and bizarre. And I don't know, I just wasn't expecting this movie to end the way it ended. And it kind of like, while I was watching, I was like, what the fuck? And then found myself thinking about it days later. And I know my buddy Kyle loves this one. Shout out to Kyle. House That Jack Built. It's going to be honorable mention for 2018. And now this may be the most surprising pick on this whole fucking list here. It's the remake of Suspiria, taking the number one spot of 2018. Yeah, I know, me picking a remake at number one at anything is crazy. But I think this is a damn good movie because Luca Guadagnino knew he could not make Argento's film again. He can't replicate the colors of Suspiria. You just can't. So what did he do? Instead, he made it bleak. He made it bland looking. He focused more on the witch lore. He focused on a twist. He focused on a crazy batshit gory finale. I think every difference that he made here worked. It's one of those movies that I think is very underrated. I like the Suspiria remake a lot. I think it's a damn good one. 2019, honorable mention is going to go to The Wretched. This was a really fun little indie film. I believe IFC produced this. Highly recommend this one. It's a very interesting little movie. Again, it's one that I only seen once, but it did have that kind of lasting impact on me, and I thought it was a damn good little horror movie. The Wretched, highly recommend that one. 2019's top pick, though, Robert Eggers' The Lighthouse. I love Willem Dafoe, but I really especially love Robert Pattinson in this movie. To me, it's Pattinson's most important role. It's the role that I think broke him out of all of that kind of, oh, you're only the Twilight guy and you're this, you're that. You know, he made a lot of good movies, you know, and independent movies. I really like him in a lot of stuff. But to me, The Lighthouse is his best performance, his finest day as an actor. And I always remember the ending of The Lighthouse of Robert Pattinson, you know, climbing the stairs to the top and finding his identity and being horrified by it, falling back down, dying. I mean, The Lighthouse is just a great film, in my opinion. I love it. 2020, we have The Invisible Man. This is James Wan's film. I mean, not James Wan, I'm sorry. This is Leigh Whannell's film. Leigh Whannell directed this one. Honorable mention, solid horror movie. Nothing great, but definitely solid. Good scare sequences. Good throwback to what the original Invisible Man movies were. 2020's topic, though, easy pick, a layup for me, The Lodge. I love this movie. My favorite horror movie so far, my favorite movie so far of this new decade from 2020 onward. I love this movie, loved everything about it. Riley Keough's performance, the unsettling atmosphere, the whole idea of the twist ending, the song at the end. I love The Lodge. I think The Lodge is one of the best horror movies. Definitely one of the best on this list. In 2021, honorable mention, Last Night in Soho, Edgar Wright, nailed it. Great music, great visuals, great use of lighting. And a movie that, I'll be honest, I haven't gone back to rewatch it. I don't know if it's going to be one of those movies that I don't go back and rewatch much, but it's a damn good movie. It's definitely worth the price of admission. Highly recommend that one. My number one, though, for 2021 is James Wan's Malignant. I loved it. It's batshit crazy. It's James Wan deciding that he wanted to change the whole stereotype of him being the Conjuring guy, the insidious guy. And about halfway through the film, this movie switches gears from psychological giallo film to almost batshit crazy body horror Frank Henenlotter film. And to me, it was just the match made in heaven. I don't know why, but this movie has just really kind of grown on me. And over time, it's become one of my faves. So I love Malignant, easily my favorite 2021. If I had to pick a top three really quick, granted, because this went 38 minutes, of course, I would say Scream, High Tension, It Follows, The Lodge, and May. That's probably my favorite five of all of these. But granted, it's tough. I mean, Funny Games would be right there. Blair Witch would be right there. Final Destination should be right there. There's a ton of these, but I highly recommend all of these. This was a fun little video to do. So thank you, Brian. I promise I'll put your link down below if people want to go see his channel. He does some good stuff. But that's going to be all for now. This was the Cemetery Man from Salem, Mass. Always taking names and kicking candy ass. Live in the color here with you on Grande's Graveyard. Too sweet, peace, and we'll catch you next time.